Well, Todd, it's a pleasure to speak to you. I found you on YouTube because of this latest the assault weapons ban. That's how I stumbled across you. And I Googled your name and it seems like you've been involved in firearm policy for quite a while. So if you don't mind introducing yourself and telling me a little bit about that, and then maybe we can naturally stumble into a conversation about firearm policy in Illinois and just how crazy it all is.
Sure. So I started lobbying back around 1989. I was on the board of the State Rifle Association at the time. I was involved with those guys. I was doing work for Beta of Illinois as our legislative coordinator. And the NRA was looking for a contract guy, so they picked me up. And I worked for them for 25 years. And so I handled a lot of the stuff that was going on in Illinois, um, and sat there and got to know a few guys at headquarters, one of them being Chris Conti, who handled all their litigation. And so I was involved with Chris in a bunch of stuff. And we went on that once the Heller decision came down, we were working on what was next. The McDonald decision came down, and then things really took off. Chicago passed a new ordinance, and we began to fight it. And I would work with Chris in developing cases, and the concealed carry case was something I developed post McDonald with Chris. And we came up with Mary Shepard. There were two cases: the Second Amendment Foundation via the Moore case filed just ahead of NRA. And so we were the second caser. So everybody remembers Moore, but Mary Shepard was the one that really got it kicked off.
Can you give me a little bit more background into some of the cases, as much as like just a
Sure.
high
Well,
level?
you had
Yeah.
Heller, which was an SAF case out of DC in the beginning.
Hmm.
Then you had McDonald, which was the Chicago handgun ban case. Out of the Chicago handgun ban case with ordinances, there grew a number of cases. One was Gouder. Sean Gouder, a friend of mine, was prohibited from being able to have a firearm in the city because of their new ordinance, because he had a misdemeanor UUW back in the day. And we took him to court over that and prevailed. You had David Lawson, one of the plaintiffs in McDonald, who wanted to register his SKS so he could keep it in the city. They wouldn't let him do that. We took up that court case and went to federal court so he could bring the rifle in to the hearing, and all that. The Illinois Firearm Retailers Association was another case that NRA pitched that stopped the ban, because of the ban on gun shops. You had Zell 1 and 2, it went up twice, which was part of an SAF case from Rhonda Ezell about the ban on ranges in the city, despite at the time the Chicago permit requiring you have to have range training in order to qualify for their ownership permit. Then you get
Is
into,
is SAF an organization?
yeah, Second
Oh,
Amendment
okay.
Foundation. So the gun
Gotcha.
guys, so in the world, you've got the NRA, National Rifle Association. You've got the Second Amendment Foundation, SAF.
Uh-huh.
You've got GOA, Gun Owners of America. You now have FPC, Firearms Policy Coalition, I think they are, amongst the various national groups that are out there.
Sure.
And so SAF's model was to start with the litigation stuff. They don't have the staffing or the manpower to do the lobbying that the NRA had. And so I worked with them, and I got cut loose from NRA. And then I went to work for the dealers for a little while. And then I retired 3 years ago.
Gotcha.
But I'm on the board of directors at the Aurora Sportsman's Club. I keep my hands in the 2A world with stuff, and I am helping shepherd and coordinate a bunch of the litigation to the gun ban in Southern Illinois.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's probably why I heard of you. Before we get to the assault weapons ban, I'd love to talk about that because I think it's funny. Honestly, it reminds me a lot of, if you can't tell, we talk about drug policy in many ways, and to me, it's funny to see legislators try to legislate things they obviously don't understand,
True.
right?
Well, the funny thing is that we're going to have a crossroads here because you've got one federal judge already saying that, the statute under 922 about being using marijuana is unconstitutional.
Yes, yes,
And
right.
this is what makes Illinois. So Illinois is more than happy to thumb their nose at the federal drug laws, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, they thumb their nose at the Supreme Court and the Constitution when it comes to the Second Amendment. Now, when
Bingo.
they passed when they legalized medical marijuana, they went in and they talked about how um, that nobody should lose their rights over any of this. And what the state police have decided was, we won't take away your FOID card, we won't take away your carry license, but we won't let you buy any new guns. We will, you can't buy anything new, which is just
Right. Well,
uh,
your only option is a private sale, and they're trying to make universal, the universal background check or whatever they say, which would
right,
effectively take away every option for a medical cannabis patient to purchase a firearm, which
right,
is crazy.
right.
But so we kind of just dove knee deep because you've been through it all. I kind of want to hear, if you can, like, what's the history? I've always gotten the impression that the history of firearm policy in Illinois has been messed up, let's just say. But can you start from the beginning and maybe take on one of the main things that I hear critics say, which is that the FOID is unconstitutional? Do you think that's a natural place to start in
Sure,
Illinois history,
sure,
and
because
then we move on?
that's where the majority of it really starts. So what
Right.
you have is in the late 60s, coming off of the King and Kennedy assassinations, the original Mayor Daley was rip shit about doing something about guns. And so they wanted to register every firearm. And that was their and there were a group of people who got together, and the downstate guys went and they basically said, okay, instead of registering firearms, do some, the owners that have to get a permit to purchase kind of thing. That's what the FOID card is. It's a permit to purchase, permit to possess. And so that was what they did. And that started things. And things were pretty much at I don't know, they just kind of lay dormant for a long time. That was 68, 72. You had a junk gun bill come through because back at a time there were a lot of guns being made out of pot metal that were being imported. And so you had this thing about the 800-degree law as to whether or not the gun was going to hold up and all that. Now, today, metallurgy is a lot different. Machining techniques are a lot different. Whether or not that's a reasonable law at this point in time is something to be considered. It does keep a fair number of low-priced firearms off the market here in Illinois. But so you go into that, and then it was later on that waiting periods crept in. 92, the instant background check came into Illinois. We actually preceded the national one. Uh, and then from there, it's just been a nonstop ebb and flow. I mean, firearms policy in this state was largely unchanged for all that time. We made some small increments, but we couldn't pass preemption to stop the municipal gun bans. They couldn't pass major gun bans. So there was no large policy shift. Around 2000, there was a policy shift about carrying, and that it went from a misdemeanor to a class 4 felony. And that originally was snuck in. And then it got watered down after the Supreme Court tossed it out. So you didn't have any significant policy changes for all that time, one way or the other. There was small things here and there, little bit about types of ammo, things like that. We got the SBRs legalized if you have a CNR license. Oh, geez, that's been over 10 years ago. I kind of lost track of time here. But you saw the first part of changes. So we got the biggest change was carry in 13. That's now going on 10 years. And at the same time, they did something on background checks. You saw a
Does carry in 13 mean you can get your concealed carry in Illinois, but also 13 other states, or what does that mean?
no 2013.
Oh, you said 2013.
Yeah,
Sorry, I misunderstood.
I'm using 13 as in
Oh,
2013.
yes, gotcha.
That's when that's when we got it. So we're going on 10 years now. Uh, so and they threw the other side a couple of bones with that. There's, you know, there was something on gun shows that was background checks, but again, all that was kind of small potato stuff. They didn't get anything significant for a long time. And now it's only been in the last couple of years with gun dealer licensing and other things that they've been able to move the ball because Illinois is going bluer and bluer. And you've had some complicit Republicans with it, and that's where it goes. So,
Gotcha. What's the gun dealer licensing thing? Did they just make it like harder to get a license
yeah,
and
they
barriers to
decide
entry?
the city people have always been blaming a couple of gun shops around the city for all their problems when half the guns are imported from outside the state. And so they always use that. They said, well, if we can just get a handle on these guys, we can shut these dealers down. Well, all the guys they complained about are still in business because they weren't doing anything wrong. And so they're still around. But they drove half the dealers out of business for all their crazy regulatory requirements for cameras, videotaping, extra paperwork, all that stuff. And a lot of guys just said not doing it. So you've got all that going on. That's what happened. And so uh, that was the beginning of it with gun dealer licensing. And now they're trying to screw with that on and off at times. So that's what's going on. That's what GDL is. Our nickname for it is gun dealer licensing GDL. But it's been it's been a headache, and it's, parts of that will undoubtedly get challenged once we get a little bit more, um, farther down this road post New York. I mean, we're 7 months post New York. Things are just starting to shake out now.
And background on that, I think I understand that, but isn't it that New York made it like nearly impossible to get a handgun? Is that right? Or am I thinking of something
Well,
else?
New York sat there and they had a proper cause requirement in order to get a carry license. It was May issue. And so it was challenged, and they said, no, your May issue bullshit doesn't wash. And the bigger part of New York was that the court had watched the lower courts misapply the Heller decision since 2008. And so they elicited a new standard for reviewing Second Amendment claims in the federal court system. And with that, that's what's touched off all this litigation, is because not only the gun ban in Illinois, but all the stuff around the country that's going on. In New York, instead of playing nice, said, oh, we're going to make it harder and we're going to challenge everything. And they're just dragging their feet because they just do not like the concept of people carrying a gun in public. So you now have these guys back in court again. There's 5, 6 cases in New York challenging all the things that they threw into their new carry law, and they're probably going to lose. But that is also given new life. There were 4 gun cases pending at the Supreme Court. They were all granted, vacated, and remanded with instructions, see New York. So there you have all these cases going back, and there are a number of cases, 4 of them that were just, all the briefings were concluded last week. So now it's in the hands of the judge. So you have a magazine ban, a semi-auto ban, a billy club ban, and ammo restrictions that are all up in front of the judge. And if he rules against the state on all those, the state of California is going to have a new problem on their hands. And it'll be interesting to see what the Court of Appeals does. You already have courts around the country taking New York seriously. You've got the fifth district down in Texas has said that part of the felon in possession can't do. You've got the civilian restraining orders for orders of protection, can't do. You've got the marijuana case out of Oklahoma, can't do. So you've got a bunch of this stuff out there, and that's the net effect of what the New York decision is. They set a new framework as to how you evaluate this stuff. So I think there's going to be some challenge. Obviously the feds are probably going to appeal the marijuana stuff up, which is going to be interesting.
Can I ask, do you know any, not to take us on a tangent, but do you know any organizations that have like taken that issue under their arm? I feel like that's just waiting for somebody to be like, hey, I'm
No,
here for you.
it's going to be no. What you're going to have is you're going to have this Oklahoma case. So it's at the district court. The government obviously is going to appeal it. They have to. That's going to go up. And then depending on what the Court of Appeals does, if the Court of Appeals sides with the individual, then Garland is going to have to appeal that to the Supreme Court. And just like he's going to have to do with the orders of protection case out of Texas, he's appealing that one to the Supreme Court. So, I would think that if you wanted the district court and the individual loses at the appellate court, why wouldn't he take it up to the U.S. Supreme Court? And what you'll probably see is a bunch of other groups come in and do a bunch of amici briefs to sit there and support whatever issue there is. But I think that's going to come up there. There's going to be a wholesale rewrite on the gun laws over the next 2 years, I think, and what's going to be allowable. I mean, I'm really surprised that the Supreme Court just doesn't block out like 2 weeks and saying, okay, we're going to deal with gun stuff. But the only other way for them to deal with it is going to be to set down a refinement of the standard of review that they put down in New York and just kind of tighten things up. And they need to tighten up when history, they said not all history is equal. So I think they have to tighten that phrase up. They have to tighten up when the appropriate time period is. They said history and tradition based on the adaptation of the Second Amendment, which is 1791. They left a small window of opportunity open for 1868 when the 14th Amendment was ratified post-Civil War and in the Reconstruction era. So there's a little bit of that. They've said the 20th century is clearly out.
What does that have? Sorry, are they trying to say that like we didn't have that weaponry back then? I'm sorry, I'm trying to see how that.
No, so the test that has been enumerated in New York is, does the text of the Second Amendment cover the conduct? Yes, no. If the text of the Second Amendment covers the conduct, then the burden flips to the state. It is the state's burden to prove that there was a law like that or something that you could analyze, make analogy to at the time of the founding that would have shed light on the subject matter. And that's 1791. So what laws were there in 1791 on the prohibition of, using illicit chemicals or drugs or however you want to phrase it to prevent somebody from owning and possessing a firearm? How? I don't think they're there. That's why the judge in Oklahoma ruled the way he did. So it is text informed by history and tradition. And that's where I think the anti-gunners and a bunch of them are going to run into a major problem as far as what's going to happen here. And then they want, if you read the briefs from the other side, they want to argue into 1868 and then into the 20th century. And the court has said no 20th century stuff. So there's a legal argument about whether it's laws around 1868 or laws around 1791 that are the controlling history as to how we define whether or not something's constitutional when it comes to the Second Amendment.
Very interesting. Thank you for breaking that down. There's a lot to that.
Mm-hmm.
And just because this is I think this is like maybe the third or fourth time. I don't know if I've discussed this topic, but a handful of times. But there's a quote that I think to set the stage for this conversation that I really like. It resonated with me. I can't think of who said it right now, but I bet, folks, if you Google it, you're going to find it. So hear me out on this, Todd. What do you think about this? There are people that love guns. There are people that hate guns. And then there are people that understand how firearms work.
Yeah.
You like
There
that?
are. Yeah.
Because the way I look at it, it's just a fucking tool. I don't have emotions about it. I mean, I do if you're trying to take it from me, but because if you're trying to take my hammer, right? It's like, why the fuck are you taking my hammer, dude? Like, I might need to use my hammer, right? So you get my analogy. Sorry, I wanted to let that sit for a second. I like that.
Yeah, no, the difference with it is, I don't have, so if you see the sticker back here,
Mm-hmm.
all right. So what it is it is a patch doing this, and the middle finger is an AR-15. Okay. And that is something I designed. And what it is, and this gets down to it, not only do I have the ability to say no, I have the means to back that up. And that's what scares the shit out of a bunch of these legislators, is that they come down, well, we said, okay, no. And I'm not some 2-year-old that's
Right.
saying no. And we have the ability to say no. That's what the Second Amendment was originally intended for, was that when you had a government get so overbearing that the people no longer thought it was representative, because we are not a democracy, we're a representative republic. And so that's the meaning behind that sticker and those patches that I have is, yeah, we can say no. And that's what gets all of our guys really fired up, is that you're taking away my means. So you're telling me I have to be completely reliant on a benevolent government. And a bunch of us just don't buy that. Where was the government when the riots were taking place in Chicago 2 years ago? Where was the government when you had the riots in LA after Rodney King in the 90s? Where was the government? No. So we don't buy that. We don't deal with that. And, when everything goes sideways, and you ask those Koreans on the roofs back in the Rodney King riots how they felt about having their rifles on the roofs of their shops and everything. No.
Yeah.
So, we saw during COVID, the government can't do it. And we have the means and ability to fend for ourselves, period, the end. So
Yeah.
that's what really drives them nuts.
Yeah. I think you're onto something there. Forgive me. So we were up into 2013. We ballooned into many different cases, and I feel like we're working our way up to this latest
Yeah,
thing,
so
which
you,
is
so
the
you
assault
had
weapons ban.
Kerry in 2013. They've been at a standstill. It wasn't until 2020
Uh-huh.
they did gun dealer, whatever. That was kind of like what started to break the log jam for them, because and then from 2020 until the first of this year, there's been this festering. They want to do something. They want to do something. Madigan back in the day kept his thumb down on a lot of stuff, and so now you are sitting here, and you had the Highland Park shooting, which was the match that lit the fuse. And so because of that, in the way the state has shifted, that the Republicans were in a super minority. Before, the math was simple. When you had, 45 Republicans, 45 Republicans plus the downstate Democrats, you had a majority, and you could kill bills in the House. And then you had some weak-kneed Republicans like Jim Durkin. And then the Republicans started losing seats in the suburbs. Then they sat there and were going after the low hanging fruit of the downstate Democrats. So the Democratic caucus got more liberal and they were ceding ground. You know, when you lose a good Republican in the suburbs to an anti-gun Democrat, we're down one vote. If I trade a good Democrat for an equally good Republican in Southern Illinois, it's a net zero. I get nothing out of that. There was no net gain to the end of the day. So with that, that was the problem. And the Republicans never put a game plan together. They had a failing, campaign strategy. And I think they had a whole bunch of problems. So with that, you saw the state turning more and more blue. They didn't take advantage of when they had Rauner's money. Then the Democrats saw the writing on the wall and said, well, if we get our billionaire in there, they can flood the airwaves. So between certain special interests that have always funded the Democrats, like labor unions and trial lawyers, then you throw a billionaire on top of it. Yeah, the Republicans have never been able to compete in that money world. So that's what happened. And then in 2013, they started talking about stuff post Highland Park. And then after that, we sat here and they cobbled together a bill. It was being pushed by anti-gunners across the country in efforts to break a log jam and have the first state in a very long time come out and pass something. And they got it done. And now we're in court.
Yeah. So that's what we know and we hear about as the assault weapons ban. Part of what I've heard about it is that they almost know that what they're doing is unconstitutional. But before I get to that, like, in other words, they're just kind of putting a bill out or a law out that they know is going to be challenged and probably struck down in the Supreme Court. But before we get to that, like, I think it's really essential that we break down just what this is, because some people don't understand, like, the fact that, like, assault weapon is kind of a buzzword. Like, they're really, and I'd love to hear you break that down. I notice you have a rifle that would qualify under the ban because it's got an extended, or it's got a removable magazine, it's got a pistol grip.
Yeah.
So those are two things that get you. But can you break that down for people that
Yeah.
are
So
watching?
this AR has a collapsible stock.
Oh yeah, the collapsible stock is part of
All
it,
right.
right?
It's got a pistol grip right here. Okay. It's got a hand guard. It's got a flash hider. All these things. Any one of those makes it a prohibited gun. So you can't buy this gun anymore in the state. And all of these parts and attachments are illegal. If you just try to just buy the handguard or whatever, that's just this gun. But it is much broader than this in terms of everything else it deals with. It goes on. So this is one of my Glock pistols.
Mm-hmm.
This pistol's legal to currently buy in Illinois. This is another one of my Glock pistols. Because it has a threaded barrel, this gun is illegal to buy in Illinois.
So that qualifies as an assault weapon because of
Yep.
the threaded barrel.
Yep. One of the most common pistols out there. So this is one of my carry guns. It has an optic on it. It has a threaded barrel. This is just the same gun, no optic, no threaded barrel. This
And
gun, come April 10th of this year, you will not be able to carry this gun on the street.
is it only the threaded barrel? Is it
Yes,
the
on this
sight
one,
too?
it's just a threaded barrel.
Okay. Well, okay. So what I was going to ask you, I think this is a good place to start to make our point, or to make my point. I don't know if it's your point, because this is the first time we've ever talked.
Sure.
But you know, that pistol right there, let's pretend it didn't have a sight on it. The one with
Mhm.
the threaded barrel. Let's pretend it
Right.
didn't have a sight on it. My question is, does that threaded barrel increase the lethality of that weapon?
Not at all. Not at all. All it
You-
does is allow me to put an attachment on the end of it. That's all it is. It it does not change the lethality or anything else to deal with it like that in any way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
I'm trying
So
to
the re
I'm trying to disassemble these to show you something.
oh, no
And
problem.
I always have a hard time with my Glocks here, just because it'll the takedown mechanism. Come on.
It's all good.
Go
But
ahead, talk. I can do two things at once.
okay. The point I think you already see my point, but for
Yeah.
listeners that are new to this subject, because again, I've not discussed it much on my show, and thank you for opening the door for me to be able to, because I think I'm gonna be able to point to this and be like, yo, I've had Todd on my show, and people will be like, all right. But anyways,
So
you know what I mean?
yeah,
But
let me show you something here real quick
sure.
about this. So take the cap off. So here's the slide off the one gun, right?
Hmm.
So if I take the barrel out of that gun, out of that
Right.
slide, and I now take the recoil spring and the barrel out. And so I put the threaded barrel and put this gun back together.
And for folks that are listening, it's chillinois.net/video to watch.
That
Okay, so now
that
that
is
gun's
illegal.
now that
That
gun's
that
an assault
switch
weapon.
I just made is illegal.
Huh.
This gun now becomes illegal.
Wow. And that's how
Just
easy it is.
changing that out makes this gun illegal. Making that, so this is the absolute insanity that exists within this law as far as what you can do.
Well,
Uh,
I haven't really got to the point that I think we were talking the same language. I want to try to make the point for the audience that again is not maybe have been introduced to this topic. Just
yeah,
really quick. So the reason I'm talking about lethality and like if there's a difference there is because the best example I can give you is that in Canada they led with their assault weapons ban, but one of the guns they did not ban was the SKS. And the
right.
SKS, correct me if I'm wrong, Todd, is basically the exact same gun as the one behind you, except it's got a wooden handle and it doesn't look as scary. But as far
No,
as
no.
function,
The
am I wrong?
SK the original yeah no the SKS originally did not have a detachable magazine. There were later variations of it that did. It was a internal 10-round magazine with the original SKS. But hang on,
Ladies and gentlemen, I think he's grabbing an SKS.
nope, I don't have an
Oh no.
SKS.
Oh darn.
I do not have an SKS. I do have some other stuff here.
Cool.
So wait.
And thanks for being willing to break this down with us literally,
That's
since we're
okay. So
actually
here,
breaking down guns.
this is a Ruger 1022.
Okay.
This gun's illegal.
Why?
First off, it has a pistol grip. Even though it's on a traditional style Monte Carlo stock, that's a pistol grip.
So what's a pistol grip defined as now? A 90-degree handle or something or what?
No, just it's like porn. You know it when you see it.
Okay. All right.
And then the other part is this has a threaded barrel
I
or
see.
a flash hider. You can see I can spin this off right here.
Now, does a flash hider? I mean, a
Yep.
flash hider doesn't really increase the lethality. It just it doesn't flash.
It protects the shooter more than anything else because it stops the shooter from being blinded. Most
Gotcha.
people think it's to hide your muzzle signature when you're out there, which is not true.
Oh, that's what I
So,
thought. So thank you for correcting that.
so yeah. So this little 1022, this little 22 rifle is illegal under the law, as is this one here. So
That looks
another
like a
10.
BB gun.
It's 22 long rifle, but because it has a threaded barrel,
Mm.
it's illegal.
Now,
So
to be clear, it's illegal to purchase. You can keep those, right?
if I choose to register them,
If you choose. So you have to register them to keep them.
if I want those guns to remain legally in my possession,
Have they opened or created the registry yet?
not yet.
No.
That won't open until sometime around October.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, okay. So if I didn't make the point, do you agree with the point that I was trying to make that some of these components, I don't feel like the pistol grip, it doesn't make the gun shoot any differently. It's
No,
not like it's like heat-seeking missiles. It's just a different way to hold the
here,
firearm.
lethality is right here. Lethality is in the cartridge. Okay, that's what it is. So this is a 5.56, which is what most of the ARs shoot. Okay,
Hmm.
this is a 308 or a 7.62 by 51. You can see the difference here. So I'll do it this way. Just if I can.
Okay.
All right. So
Wow. Holy
this is a
crap.
30 cal. This is an AR
Yeah.
typically. All right. This is varmints and whatever.
Hmm.
Um, and so with that, um, you know, the cartridge, think of it this way. The round of ammunition that the gun is designed for is equivalent to the engine in your car. So the 5.56 is like having a V6. This 308 is like having a V8. That's and what you do from there to tweak them, different types of powders, different weights of bullets. That's what all drives that. This is a 460 Smith and Wesson. It is a pistol cartridge. See the comparison there? This fires a 285 grain slug. This fires 55 grain slug. So you're talking something that is almost 6 times the weight and mass
Yeah.
moving downrange. So that's what drives it. And they all keep trying to make this special. The whole assault weapons bullshit is just about cosmetics. They are guns that look like military guns,
Right.
machine guns. And that's been their whole thing, is to conflate that.
Right. Right. And just for the audience that are clear, like you say, I think a lot of people confuse that. Like they see somebody with an AK-47 and they assume they're like, oh, that's a machine gun. And it's like, no,
Right.
an AK-47 was legal in Illinois as a semi-automatic rifle. The difference that you just pointed out is if it's an automatic rifle, that's a
Right.
machine gun, which
You
is
know, think with this way. You ever see those Volkswagens that have Ferrari bodies over them? It's not a Ferrari,
right.
not anything else, right? It's a kit car. And
Yeah.
it's the same difference. They look like something, but they're not.
Yeah. So this is slightly unrelated, but still on the topic of the assault weapons ban. So forgive me for slightly switching subjects, but I'm curious what you think about this. I feel like it's another way that we'll agree on, like, in spirit on a subject. So like, uh, I read that only police and former police will continue to be able to purchase these weapons that are outlined in the ban and possess them, of course, right? Because they can purchase them.
Well,
First of all, am I correct in that?
partially.
Okay.
There's about 6 different enumerated categories. You've got cops, you've got wardens. How that gets in there, I don't know. Security guys, law enforcement officers,
No former
attorneys.
military, is that
Nope,
correct?
No
See,
retired military. That's part of divorce lawsuit because I probably have more training with firearms than most cops do. I
right.
spend more time on the range than most cops do. And all that, and that's part of his equal protection claim that, hey, we've got Navy SEALs who have more firearms training, and if you're using that training as your background to it, that is your justification, you're wrong. So no, don't see that. Um, but there's an equal protection claim to be had there. I don't think it's going to go anywhere at the end of the day. They've never gotten to that. So, um,
I just think that part is insane. Look, like on one hand, it's not insane. There is precedent for police having access and former police having access to more things than a civilian or maybe even former
active duty
military.
cops, yes. Retired cops, when I left the military, I left my hand grenades and machine guns behind.
Right. But
So either you treat one the same or none. And that's why I always oppose retired cops carry. And they're like, well, we put bad guys away. Great. What about the state's attorneys out there who put bad guys away? What about people who show up and testify against the bad guys to put them away? You don't want that? Well, you let ours in, then we'll help you out. Nope. Chicago FOP used to play that game all the time, and I would kill that bill all the time. And just like, no, you're not that special.
right. Well, one of the other ways I was going to give where they kind of do have, like you said, with military, you hang it up, you put your firearm away, you leave it at base when you get out or whatever. I'm not using the right terminology, but forgive me.
That's okay.
Um, so with law enforcement, at least in Illinois, I know that you cannot become a private investigator unless you have been in law enforcement. Is that?
No, you have to have certain experience levels and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay. I'm wrong on that
Um,
too. Damn. Thank you for
and
correcting me on this.
I don't spend a lot of time in the private security world or dealing with those guys, but you can get in, but there's a way to get in, but it's whatever.
Okay.
Um,
Gotcha.
you can go through, be a security guard and work your way up into all that stuff to get an investigator's license and then be able to own a business or whatever. But I don't worry about all that because I'm more worried about the average guy, not that business. That business is not where I
Yeah.
spent my time.
So, thank you for humoring me on that tangent
That's
and
all right.
for informing me on that too. Back to just the assault weapons ban in general. I feel like I dove in with some of my thoughts and I started right on the point of lethality. What is just like what is your perspective on why this is a pointless
Because I
endeavor?
think Justice Scalia got it right when he said some have made the argument bordering on the frivolous. Only those arms in existence in the 18th century are protected. We do not view constitutional rights that way. And if we treated the First Amendment the way they treat the Second Amendment, you'd be left with the printing press, the soapbox, and the quill pen. That's it. They have no problem being absolute hypocrites. Well, the founding fathers never could have envisioned an AR-15. I disagree with that, but the founding fathers in no way could envision the internet. But you could say the First Amendment protects that all day long. Radio, television, all those kinds of things. They're all protected via the First Amendment. But now you're telling me that a little old AR-15 somehow is different, that the Second Amendment is different, that it doesn't keep up with technological advances. The Fourth Amendment has. The justices cited the Fourth Amendment and the First when they referenced that passage. They can't sit outside your house and use thermal sights to see what they could not otherwise see to gain access to something. They don't get to do that. So the Constitution has kept up with modern innovations, and they just don't want to acknowledge it when it comes to guns. And they come at this from an emotional side of it, not a logical side. So you're never going to win that argument. The only way
Yeah.
you're going to beat them is to just crush them politically. either at the polls or in the courts. To where, no, my job these days, since Illinois seems so far gone with a Republican Party that can't get out of its own way, that my job is to crush them in the courts, put such a legislative straitjacket on them that they can't get out of it. And that's it. And people said, well, Roe was settled law for 50 years. Roe was never settled law. Nobody ever agreed with that from the get-go. The majority of our history, most people have believed that they had a right to own a gun. There have only been academics and others that have tried to continuously push the militia view that it was only for the state militia, not for individuals. They have tried to beat that into the national psyche, and they've largely failed. Otherwise, we wouldn't have 400 million firearms plus in private hands today. So you've got all that, and it's just no.
That was a brilliant analogy. The First Amendment and the internet and
Yeah.
Radio and
Justice Scalia even said that in that same passage. It's on page 8 of the Heller decision. It's not hard to find, and they just don't want to admit to it. They can't have that honest debate.
well, and if I may, I feel like it would be easier to explain to somebody back then, even if you had a musket, what, okay, this is a cartridge. We load it into the magazine. The spring assists it into the firearm, and it continues.
They were working on all that trying to figure stuff out back in the day.
But hear me out. If you tried to explain the internet to somebody back then, they'd be like, dude, you're fucking crazy. Or like the radio, you know what I mean? Because it's like going through the air. Like, try explaining that to somebody when electricity doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So, yeah. But so that was a brilliant point to your point. So, well, so where do we stand today with the challenges and everything else?
Yeah, you've got two simple tracks. You have the state court challenges, then you have the federal court challenges. The federal court challenges are coming down in a myriad of ways. And you've got 4 cases in Southern Illinois that are in the federal courts. You have a case up in the Northern District out of McHenry County. You have the Naperville case that has gone forward to the Court of Appeals. You have you then have Highland Park and Cook County semi-auto bans and a new one called Herrera that were filed up here. And they're contemplating combining them or doing whatever. And so you've got these multiple tracks. You almost need a bingo card to keep track of everything. So with that, that's what you got. We are on a track. The state has to file their briefs and our cases on Thursday. We then have 21 days to reply. Our replies will be due the 23rd. And then from there, we will have oral arguments on the 12th of April. And we'll see what the judge says then.
Gotcha. Can you explain to me like what's going on with like some people have stays? Like it seems like a limited number of people.
So the state challenges were for the named individuals. They didn't go in with what we call organizational plaintiffs. If you look at all the cases downstate, there are individual plaintiffs and there are organizational plaintiffs, meaning that we are an organization that represents a body of people, and you fall under our umbrella. Divorce cases didn't do that. They named all the individuals. That's how you have these huge pleadings with everybody's name on there. And so the TROs that they got were for those named individuals. And the thing is, you've got a TRO, a preliminary injunction, and a permanent injunction. TROs, it's essentially the same criteria to get a permanent injunction, but it's temporary in nature, hence the name temporary restraining order, and they can be extended. Typically, they're only good for a couple of weeks to a month on the front side as you litigate out the potential for an injunction. With that, they succeeded in the TROs, went up on appeal. The appellate court upheld it in a limited fashion. And now the attorney, and they didn't do a Second Amendment claim. They did it on 14th Amendment equal protection. And so that's up there. Now you got to see what's going to happen, whether or not the state Supreme Court is going to uphold those TROs or not. That's debatable. So it's like, I can litigate a TRO. I mean, our guys could, but then we have to reproduce all that work for an injunction. So let's just skip the TRO, go straight for the injunction. Because if we prevail on the injunction, we can appeal the injunction. Or if we lose on the injunction, we can appeal the lack of them giving us an injunction. It's kind of hard to appeal a TRO. So there's a difference in, injunction means that it's going to be in place throughout the litigation, and the judge has already determined that there's a preponderance of the evidence that we are likely to prevail in our end game. So if we gain an injunction here, they will appeal it up to the Seventh Circuit, and then we'll see what the Seventh Circuit says.
Gotcha. And that happens on April 13th, you said?
That's the oral arguments.
Okay.
I would anticipate the judge to take a week to 2 weeks after that to rule and come down with his decision.
Gotcha. And so if he says, yeah, you guys got a point, then it dies there. It dies in the state.
If he issues an injunction, then we go back to January 9th. Everything goes back the way it was.
Okay.
And then the state will appeal that up to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals and say the judge got it wrong. And they will try to undo the injunction.
And then vice versa. If he says you guys got it wrong, you'll do the same thing.
We will appeal it upstairs and say he got it wrong.
Right. Makes sense. So
no matter what happens here, we're going up on appeal.
Going to the state.
No, we're in federal court. So ours will go to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. And depending on what happens there, we'll be going to the Supreme Court.
Very interesting.
Now, there are other cases that are farther along in the process outside of Illinois. So depending on what happens there, we'll see.
And they would address what's happened in Illinois, is what you're saying?
Yeah, you have two semi-auto bans in California, Miller and I forget the other one, that are up on appeal, or they're in front of the trial court now. And if Judge Benitez issues his decision next week and he issues in our favor, then the court is going to, or the state is going to appeal that decision up. And we'll see what happens from there. You've got Maryland. That case was argued in front of the Court of Appeals in December. And so it's pending out there. That decision could come down any day now.
So either way, this is going to the Supreme Court. And
it is.
And I mean, the Supreme Court, wouldn't you say, would lean towards that issue? I know it's hard to make a.
I think you will have. I think by June of next year, you'll have a resolution on this issue. From the standpoint that, let's say Maryland becomes the first case. So Maryland comes out of the Court of Appeals, we win, and the Attorney General out of Maryland takes it to the Supreme Court. Well, now you've got a divergence in the circuits. If we prevail, let's say we prevail in both instances, district court, Court of Appeals, Kwame's going to take it upstairs. If California loses at the district court level and the appellate court level, they're going to take it up. And if in any one of these cases we lose at the Court of Appeals, we're going to take it up. So let's say that California wins district, loses at the Court of Appeals, we win at the Court of Appeals. Now you have a conflict within the two circuits. that's when the Supreme Court really takes it up because they want uniformity between the circuits. So depending on how fast we get through some stuff depends, but the way, it just depends on how long the Ninth Circuit takes to rule. It depends on how long the Seventh Circuit takes to rule. So let's say, just game out a timeline, that we sit there, we win an injunction at the trial court, and it's issued for third week in April. Goes up to the Seventh Circuit. It's going to take them a month to get their act together. So now you're looking the third week of May. They usually take a summer recess. Maybe we get a briefing schedule over the summer, and then we come back in, say, September for oral arguments. They then take another 120 days, 90 days to issue an opinion. You're looking at January of 2024. So it depends on when we get that conflict. And if we've got that conflict, then, and like I said, if Maryland goes our way, the state will be appealing that upwards. So it just depends on how soon we get that conflict. So let's say that Maryland goes against us. Our side will appeal it up. And then that's an argument that they got New York wrong. They didn't listen to what you guys said in New York. And the court may clarify what they said in New York. But if you get the Court of Appeals going against us go against us in Maryland and goes with us in the Seventh, then you got a straight up conflict. And so I think it is very possible, depending on how fast the Court of Appeals deal with things so you've got a case in New Jersey, you got a case in California, you got our case. Then you've got two cases in Colorado where they have not gone through the district court. They were issued injunctions. So it depends on when that conflict arises. And once that conflict arises, then we're in front of the Supreme Court for sure. Because they can't turn them all down. They have to accept one. But I seriously think that we could have a resolution to this issue by June of next year.
Very interesting. You are to guns as I am to drug policy. I try to keep up on all the different things that are going on, and you are the same
I only
way.
got 30 years of doing it, so you build on that data bank, and if you're into it, you're into it. I mean, I tangentially follow some of the drug stuff. I was arguing about the medical marijuana stuff and all that kind of thing. Now the recreational use and all that, as to what there is. So, and I don't necessarily agree with the marijuana prohibition. I think the cleaner thing to do is just have the federal government take it off to Schedule 1.
Yeah.
And just be done with it. The only issue I've ever had with it is being able to prove that somebody is incoherent behind the wheel of a vehicle.
Right.
I mean, the other thing I'm slowly having a gripe with is January I was in Vegas and the whole frickin' place just stunk. When we were out on the street, it's skunk weed. I don't, it's not, at least pipe tobacco smells good. At least a decent cigar smells good. Okay. That stuff it's just like ditch weed or something. And it's like, really, guys? It's like I'm walking down the sidewalk. It's like I got a garbage truck going past me. And that's my personal beef with it. I don't have anything with it one way or the other.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I view it, like you say, as just like kind of a personal freedoms thing. I would prefer it. Here's the way I look at it. And this is where I will agree with you. I think that people should try to smoke weed in public like they smoke cigarettes in public. And by that, I mean, be respectful to people, like give a fucking distance, be in a smoking area, all those things. But if you're not hurting me, hey man, it's all good there. So, but yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
I get libertarian about a bunch of that
right.
stuff for the most part. My thing is just like I said, so long as well, this isn't like alcohol where I can get behind the wheel of a vehicle. Okay, stay out of my way, whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think the policy with regard, I think that Illinois is just such a hypocrite. Well, we're not going to take your FOIA card away. It's against federal law. All right.
Hmm.
You're not going to tell you just can't buy any. This is where they just get so, crazy about this stuff. And if they didn't have double standards, they'd have no standards at all.
Yeah. So just one of the ways like an analogy I have between cannabis and firearms, and people laugh when I say that. They're like, what? How are you going to relate these two? But hear me out. You've always been able to create a firearm at home. You've always been able to grow cannabis at home, right? That's kind of the analogy that I have. And my question is like with this, and it's slightly unrelated to most of the things we've been talking to so far, but like, would you agree that this whole ghost gun thing, and it's like I think that's just a buzzword, by the way.
Mhm.
The whole topic is seriously chipping away at the Second Amendment because hear me out here. People used to complain, like in Illinois, I remember the local Dick's Sporting Goods stopped carrying AR-15s, and
Mhm.
like a few people came in and complained to the people there. And I understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, they were making stupid arguments. Hear me out. They were like, you're taking away from my Second Amendment right. And the guy at Dick's was like, dude, we just don't carry them anymore. And I was just, I, my point is like the
Yeah.
Second Amendment
So,
doesn't guarantee you the right to purchase an AR-15 from Dick's, but it does guarantee you the right to possess that firearm, you know?
well, you have to have the means to acquire it. The problem
Fair,
with
fair.
Dick's
Yeah.
was so understand this. This is where you need to go back and comprehend what New York is and what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay.
New York says if it's covered by the text of the Second Amendment, it is protected conduct. The burden then flips to the state to prove by history and tradition that the item they're regulating, the what their regulation is, what their law is constitutional
Hmm.
because it was something the founding fathers would have gone, oh, I could have had a V8, right?
Right.
So when you get down that road, Ezell sat there and said that you have a right to maintain proficiency, a right to practice. You have to have a place to do that. Therefore, the city's ban on ranges was unconstitutional. They also said you had a right to acquire firearms. Well, if you have a right to acquire, there has to be a corresponding place to sell them, whether that be a retail, commercial establishment, or a private transaction. So, under the Seventh Circuit precedent, all of that is encompassed within the text of the Second Amendment. So, that's why the gun dealers are arguing about the right to repair. Because if I have the right to have a gun, I have a right to keep my firearm in good working order. All right. So you go down that road. The more things we get enumerated by the courts as being corollary or tangent to the Second Amendment, the more items that become protected, the more conduct that is protected. And then when the state chooses to regulate or restrict that conduct, they have to justify it through history and tradition. Going back to the concept that Eli Whitney, the guy that invented the cotton gin, sat there and helped perfect the modern forging technique with Samuel Colt. So, um, now to the ghost gun thing. Ghost guns is just the latest shock term, buzzword, bumper sticker slogan that the anti-gunners have put to guns. Assault weapons started the craze, Saturday night specials, pocket rockets, sniper rifle, all that stuff are buzzwords that they just keep throwing out there to demonize and demagogue a category of firearms. It's all marketing. They've completely gone away from gun control to gun safety. Tell me when the last time was they taught anything about safety. They don't. They teach restrictions. They teach infringements. They don't teach anything about safety. They don't teach about the right way to do a press check on a gun to make sure that you can tell whether or not there's a round in the chamber. They don't tell you anything about how to clear this and deal with it so you can, so you can make sure that it's an empty gun. They don't say anything about locking it to the rear, looking down this side, looking down that, making sure that there's nothing. They don't do any of that. So they rebranded themselves and they are masters at marketing. That's all they are, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what ghost guns are. And the thing about ghost guns, it drives them nuts. It's the power thing. You can't stop the signal. The 3D printing stuff made them absolutely lose their minds
Right.
because you could share a file and now you can't stop me. You know,
Yeah.
the gun dealer licensing ran 50% of the FFLs in the state out of business. Oh, we're going to fewer places, right? Well, I can go in my basement and make one. And it
Right.
drives them nuts. They don't have that control. They think they have to absolutely have that control.
And it all goes back to, not to keep bringing up cannabis, but we've agreed prohibition doesn't work with the stuff that you're sitting behind. It's on your hat, Jack Daniels. We learned the lesson there. Prohibition does not
Oh
work.
yeah. Yeah. And I was
You
on the
can't control
border
it.
in 1990 and 1991. I was on the border chasing drug runners, bringing stuff across the border with the military. I was down there.
Really?
Yeah, I was down there as part of JTF-6. We
Tell
ended
us,
up on the,
tell me more about that. This
oh
sounds
yeah.
crazy.
Oh yeah. I got called up for Desert Storm. I was part of a cavalry unit. And as part of my call up for Desert Storm, we thought we were going on a preliminary deployment exercise. And they
Mm-hmm.
ended up sticking us down in Yuma, Arizona. We were on the border right there. And we were part of a counter narcotics and counterterrorism task force called JTF-6. Back then, they were even talking about Hajis coming across the border and sneaking in and everything, especially with us going after Saddam back in the day. And so we were down there supplementing the Border Patrol. We were reservists that were called up to active duty. And yeah, we brought our night vision, our M16s, and we went down there. Can you hit pause for just a minute? I got my wife calling me.
Cool. The wife, man, you got to take a call from the
Yeah,
boss
I
sometimes.
have to. So I ended up down there working with the Border Patrol. And we worked on a rotation to where it was you would spend 3 days in the field, come out of the field, we would get a couple days off, and then we would go out and ride shotgun with federal agents in their vehicles to back them up, and then we would transition back into the field. I'm going to try to do two things at once while I talk to you.
No problem, man. Cheers, by the way.
So let me see if I can make this happen or not. It's going to take me a minute. So we were doing that, and we had night vision equipment. We had, our rifles, and we had some other. The tow guys had brought their thermals with us. And so we had access. So we could see some stuff that they didn't really have back in 1990 with the Border Patrol and all that stuff. And so it was interesting. There was one night they told us at this checkpoint as we were sitting over this Border Patrol station that was on a road on the edge of California. They said, look, these guys, if they pull off up here, they'll turn their lights off. They will then turn around and pull over, and they'll let the guys out. Those guys will typically walk up to this dried creek bed. And then from there, if let us know, then we'll hold the car, then we'll come find these guys. And it was like, okay. And so one night we were just exactly like they said. They pulled off half a mile up the road. The lights went off. We said, "Hey, you got a guy." Told them on the radio, and so they turned around and they did that, and they sent an agent up. He got back up there. They detained the car, and then this guy's going down. He said, "I don't see him. I don't see him," and we're looking at him for a night vision. Like, "You're not there yet. Hang on." And we could see these guys, and then we set up a parachute flare. And here you got these guys like this caught out once. It said, "Do you see them now?" And they're like, "Yeah, we see them now. We got this." So let me see where I'm trying to figure out how to share my screen with you.
There should be like a little green button in the middle.
Share screen. Here we go.
There you go.
Is that up? Share.
Not
I got to
yet.
click this.
There we go.
So here you go. This is me on that deployment in our hide when we would take chances. That's me. That's me reading a book. Yes, that is a can of frosting sitting up there next to me with a diet soda. I always pack some in. My rifle is right behind me. That's my buddy's rifle taking the picture in the foreground. But that was from that deployment when I was down there on the border. Right, and at that point in time, we were only we were less than 200 feet from the border.
So you guys
Right
were
in
just
that
like
thicket.
sleeping outside with night vision?
Oh yeah, yeah, we were hiding out. We would go into a hide for almost 3 days, and then we would camp out there looking for crossings, looking for illegals, whatever it was. We caught some coyotes one night packing in some duffel bags full of dope. And there's a picture in a shoebox somewhere of me standing next to about 85 pounds of dope.
What kind of
And
dope?
mostly marijuana.
Ah,
There was some coke, um, but and the border patrol agents had their own way of dealing with. Sometimes when it wasn't worth their paperwork, they had their own ways of dealing with stuff. And they, yeah, you go explain why you're not arrested and there's no report on this.
oh, that's kind of funny because like, who are you gonna go to, type of thing.
They just pour it out on the side of the road.
Oh, interesting. Gotcha.
They weren't
What?
taking it for themselves or anything, but here, you know
Yeah.
what? This isn't worth it. And there was a night that we may have ended up on the other side of a imaginary line on a map that
Oh,
wasn't United States territory anymore, chasing a coyote. But
the
yeah,
coyote, is that a term for a drug runner?
yeah, the coyotes are the guys that know the path. So you got the mules, which are the
Hmm.
guys packing it. And then you got the
Oh,
coyotes,
they
which are the
lead.
guys that are sniffing around. And they call them coyotes because they're cagey like a coyote. If you've ever done any coyote hunting or anything like that, they're smart animals. And they got that nickname, the coyotes. And so, they got three of the mules, excuse me, that night. And the coyote he got away and was tracked back a ways
Yeah.
before it was called off because I think the words that were explained to me was this could be an international incident.
Oh, whoa. Well, that sounds
So
crazy. Well,
yeah,
so
no,
I know we didn't necessarily plan to talk about this, so and I know we're almost at the top of our time as well, but um I wanted to ask you, I'm actually inviting former law enforcement and current law enforcement. I've just found that current law enforcement are less likely to hop on air with me. More so, I've had better luck with former law enforcement. But I guess I wanted to ask you, because this is the question I ask them, is like, how did you I know that you probably were able to just look at it as a job, but when it came to like the drugs specifically, like did that ever, since you said earlier you don't really care about cannabis and such, Did that
No,
ever get into your head or like,
my opinion on that has evolved over time. I
okay,
was part of the war on drugs, and I have a completely different spectacle on that.
fair enough.
I'm probably closer to Tom Clancy's Clear and Present Danger in the way that we ought to handle it. I think that my feeling is that with a real president that has the cojones, that we should declare those drug cartels to be international terrorist organizations, and they should face this. We should go after them with interdiction teams and cruise missiles and hellfires, and we got to know where they are. You can't tell me you can't find these guys. Um, and you know, I don't necessarily think going after the guy smoking weed on the street corner is the solution to the drug policy. But I also think that between the problems we have with fentanyl and heroin and everything else, I mean, I don't believe in having open markets for people to shoot up as a solution. It just doesn't seem like a good idea to me. But at the same time, the guys that are really supplying the stuff, because they've been running guns back and forth. They've been
Right.
doing all kinds of others. I mean, they killed Brian Terry. How long ago was that? Under Obama, 10 years ago, because of their failed policies. So I think that there's way, but no, I didn't. In the day, they were smugglers. They were, part of the cartel empire, and
Mhm.
taking any of them down didn't bother me at all.
Do you
Uh,
think that the best way to maybe take on the cartel would be to, I know you said you like not an open market or whatever, but like if we legalize drugs and we were the supplier of drugs and people knew what they were getting when they were buying those drugs, most like you know what I mean? Like that I don't know what
I
else they
think
can do
there
other than
I
human
think there is
traffic.
an I think there's an argument to be made for some of that.
Hmm.
However, I also believe that history shows that when a society just goes down that rabbit hole, it never ends well. You
What do you
had
mean?
the Romans and the Greeks both. If you go back that far, when you had nothing but the games and the circus and bread, and then you had everything else that went along with that, their morality went into the toilet, and that society is no longer in existence today. And I think that we see shades of that today. Some people in this world refuse to recognize that there is evil out there.
But so the way I look at it, man, is like I agree with you in the on face value, but here's the way I look at it. Like you can get in a car and you can choose not to wear a seatbelt and
Mhm.
something really bad can happen, right? My thing is like you should still be able to make that choice.
Me
And
not wearing
so,
it, I agree with that, and I don't wear a seatbelt. I don't.
but
I fought helmet laws in this state, in this country, for almost 30 years. But here's the difference. The difference, I will argue, is me not wearing a seatbelt does absolutely nothing to you individually. However, what we do have is we do have the addiction problem, to where that pushes people into other types of crime to get the money to feed that addiction. That becomes my problem when it's me or my family that is getting burglarized, carjacked, stuck
yeah,
up, strong arm robbery,
but
mugged, or whatever. And so there's a difference between that. Again, I don't claim to have the solution.
right, right. And
I
I
just I don't think just saying no to everything works. At the same
mhm.
time, open air drug markets and things like that, I don't think work either. So
I just
hold
view
on.
oh no problem.
The dogs just saw
No
someone
problem.
walking a dog down the street, and they just
Nope.
so
Well, I just
so I mean, in 1990 and 1991, did I have a problem picking up the mules and the extensions of the cartels? Not at all. And if they gave me an opportunity to go after the cartels today, I wouldn't have a problem with that at
yeah.
all.
But if I could, I view drugs like guns, and you can abuse them. You can hurt other people. You can, that's not the proper use. But that doesn't address what your point, the point you brought up, and I'll address your point. But my thing is, I believe that all of these drugs are tools, and we've acknowledged that. That's why the scheduling system exists. Like heroin is a scheduled drug, fentanyl is a scheduled drug. My mom actually recently went into surgery and they had to use fentanyl. Now, did they use it in the way that the fucking cartels use it? Absolutely not, because they're not using it properly.
Oh, dude, a friend of mine
So
was a vet when ketamine came on the market, when that was getting messed up. And
my point is, you can abuse anything, and the things to address your point, I hear you. I hear your thing where it's like typically people with a drug issue are the ones that are breaking in to try and steal shit. But my thing to that is the fact that they're doing drugs or whatever they're going through isn't a crime. The crime is what they're doing to you, which is breaking into your house and stealing your shit. You know what I mean?
I agree with that, except I don't know anybody that's sitting there breaking into people's houses and mugging people so they can get money to buy a new Glock. All right. So
Yeah.
I understand what you're trying to say. Just in the confines of your own home under control, maybe. Like I said, the weed stuff, I really don't care about. It's just everything else that leads down a spiral. And it is what it is. I just,
Yeah, I
but
just think about, because one of your cases you made it. I really didn't intend to get into this conversation. We can
that's fine.
back out, and I also want to plug your YouTube channel, which will be in the podcast description, folks.
Sure.
But like my point with that, yeah, is just simply in this freedom espousing country, you would think that it would be like, look, you got to be responsible with your freedom. Like part of being an adult is being responsible with that freedom. And whatever you fucking do, like we've got a lot of things that we're allowed to do. We can go parachuting, we can buy bleach and explosives. We could buy explosives and what is it, tannerite? We could go shoot that shit.
It's a binary compound, yeah. But no, I used to skydive. I was a paratrooper in the military, so yeah,
And I
we
just
can
think we're
do.
trusted to do so many different things. And one of the arguments you made earlier for guns was like, back in the day, what could we do? Back in the day, what was permissible? Back in the day, what was
Well, back in the
normal? And
day,
I
there was
feel like
real
back in the
cocaine
day,
and Coca Cola.
that's what
So
I'm saying. And you could and To Kill a Mockingbird, you read To Kill a Mockingbird, and yeah, people had problems with morphine, but you know what? Morphine was available because if you got shot or something or you broke your leg, sometimes you needed morphine. So I
yeah,
don't know. It's
and
just like that's my thing on it. I wish we were that America where it's like still in Sears, you could get that shit if you wanted
I,
to. That's America, baby.
who knows where we're gonna end up? I mean, there's a whole bunch of that, but that's
Yeah. So,
uh,
anyways, again, I
but
didn't
the
intend to.
difference is the difference in that is when a couple of guys like us can sit down and have a conversation about it, and
Yeah.
it's not you're not screaming across the tables or
Right.
whatever. I mean, this is part of this is what's lost within, I think, the body politic,
Hmm.
and that you can't people don't some people don't know how to disagree without just taking it completely too personal. I mean,
Right.
look, and look, there are things out there. This whole thing about minor attracted person these days. You want me to be pro-choice? I'm pro-choice for pedophiles. You get either a 9 millimeter or a 38, your choice.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that stuff with kids and dogs will set me off on an edge in a heartbeat.
I'm
And
with you there.
and there's so that's why I say you go back to the ancient Rome and the ancient Greeks, and especially Rome, when the debauchery and some of the other things that their society spun out of control, and they're not around anymore in that form or fashion, even though it lasted for how long. Um, I mean, our country is 200 and some odd years, 50-ish years old or whatever. We are, um, we are a fledgling, but we're one of the longest representative republics that's been around. So, yeah, I look, I tend to lean more libertarian on things. I like, I'm a back the blue guy. in terms of, I think if you want to have an orderly society, you do need to have, law enforcement out there. But, I get bent out of shape when over in Plainfield, they sit there and they have cops standing on the corner at the street sign to see if you're wearing a seatbelt. And I've been ticketed for that because I refuse to wear a seatbelt. And I think, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
I'm a law and order guy until, they decide that, you can't have your 9mm. We're going to come and confiscate it for you. Well, then, okay. But most of the cops I know, we ain't going to do that. The former chief of my town told me point blank, he says, you know what this comes to when you get to that point? You're telling me I have to arrest the people I go to church with, the people in my neighborhood, the people that are parents on my son's football team, the guys I see in the bar. That ain't going to happen. And that's why this thing is ultimately going to fail. The real question is what's going to happen and how are they going to sit there and, it took 5 lawsuits before Rahm Emanuel got the fucking picture and gave up on guns. What's it going to take for the General Assembly and their collective wisdom to figure this out, that you're not going to win? Because I'm of a mindset that at a certain point in time, you start holding them in contempt. And I think that's going to be the big question for the court. The Supreme Court is when you say no and they go like this, what are you going to do, Mr. Chief Justice? How are you going to sit there if the legislature is going to thumb their nose at a co-equal branch of government? How are you going to fix that?
And a topic I'd like to close on, if we could. I don't even know if you know about this, so if you're not familiar, it's okay. And I also acknowledge that we're 2 white dudes talking about it, but I think we can still talk about it. Of course we can, right? The racist origins of gun control, or at least what I've
Oh,
been
sure.
taught to be.
Sure. You got the Jim Crow laws, and you got going back to Dred Scott when they sat there and said, if we found for him, then he would have the right to keep and bear arms like anybody else. Gun control laws have been used by the Dixiecrats as a way, and somehow the Black community has been brainwashed into it that because of the crime in their streets, that this is the solution. Rather than economic empowerment, better schools. How much you want to bet in most of the places that are majority Black and brown populated, that their schools are doing less than 50%? In terms of graduation, reading rates, standardized test scores, whatever. That, all the industry. Chicago used to have a whole line of steel mills. Forget the environmental impacts, but it used to be once upon a time that a guy could, without a high school diploma, could go make a good living, could have what's really a living wage. That's why, as a union operator, I'm for prevailing wage. I'm not for a minimum wage. Minimum wage is an entry-level deal. But the trades, I have a pension because I spent over 30 years in the trades. I'm retired 3 years. I retired at the age of 55 with a pension, and I could. My wife doesn't work. She's been she doesn't work in terms she's not employed. She works keeping me in check, and she works taking care of our family and building our family and all that stuff. Okay, but I will never say a stay-at-home mom doesn't work. They just have a different set of responsibilities. But she wasn't an employee bringing home a paycheck for the vast term. So if you want to talk about that, yeah, gun control is routinely used in a racist way. You look at the filings in other states to where when they are losing, and even our own attorney general has done this, when they are losing on the history and tradition, they cite colonial era rules and laws about Catholics not being able to own guns, Quakers not being able to own guns, the slave codes, and Blacks and Native Americans not being able to own guns. Then they stand around and go, oh, that would never hold today. But you're trying to buttress that racist crap in order to perpetuate your prohibition today. Who did UUW and the carry law benefit the most? the people in Inglewood, the people in Austin, because now they had a means to be able to get a carry permit, so they weren't getting popped. My buddy Sean Gowder, the guy that I talked to you about earlier, he got popped for carrying a gun for protection. You ask the attorney general if he doesn't have a friend who got popped on a UUW because he ran like a coin operated laundry or something that had a lot of cash business, and he got jacked up on that. And if that's fair, because Illinois didn't want to have a carry law back in the day. Yeah, that's all bullshit. And I just don't understand. The problem is you have these guys like Sharpton and Jackson et al. I'll tell you a story. Jesse Jackson's kid used to buy guns at Chuck's gun shop. The very one he would protest and everything. He would, Jesse Jackson Jr. bought guns, including assault weapons, at Chuck's gun shop back in the day. Now he's a convicted felon. He can't own a gun. But then they used to have protests in front of his shop. So, how is it that you're over here sponsoring every gun control bill that comes through Congress as a sitting member of Congress, and that you turn around and the very people you want to blast, you go patronize their business and buy the very thing you're voting to ban? Oh, because it's not going to affect me because I'm now one of the ruling class? Yeah, bullshit. I can't tell you how many legislators sat there and told me they have carry permits and vote for all this bullshit. I can't, you had a state senator who kept a 38 in his drawer of his desk and would vote anti-gun every single time. Oh no, the hypocrisy there is crazy. And it's going to take guys like the 761st Gun Club and places like that to break through this, because they're the guys that need this. You want to know, you got to have economic empowerment. Where are the jobs to where guys that don't graduate high school can still go make a living? You got to have a school system that prepares them to be able to go to college and do things like that. And you got to have role models. The role model I grew up with was my father, who went to work 40 to 60 hours a week, who put himself through night school so he could practice law in front of the ICC, not being a lawyer. What are the role models that you have there? They've just destroyed the nuclear family. And it's all the New Deal and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, the reason I brought this topic up, it's I just Googled and found one. I just read a lot about history and how, I know people say this as a vague term, but back in the day, that was a point of pride to be able to own a firearm, and that there were even laws that prevented African Americans from, just people of color, of because it included Indians or Native Americans as well, prevented them from purchasing rifles. I believe they could only purchase shotguns in certain areas.
Yeah. Well,
and it's like,
so where are you from?
I'm from Champaign,
Okay, I
Illinois.
wasn't sure if you were in Illinois or not, but
Mhm.
there used to be um uh there used to be a housing project called Ida B. Wells, named after a famous black woman. But I did this on their Twitter accounts when they were posting Twitter stuff over Black History Month. I sat there when they referenced Ida B. Wells. Her quote was, "A Winchester rifle should have a place of honor in every black home, and it should be used for the protection which the law refuses to give."
Yeah. Yeah,
And so,
that's
yeah,
another one I've heard. Yeah.
no, completely agree with. But yeah, I'm a white kid whose family left the South Side, 103rd and Eggleston, back in 1967, and I grew up in the suburbs. Yeah,
Okay.
but I
Where are
don't.
you from now?
I live in Yorkville,
Yorkville? Where is that?
60 miles west of Chicago.
Okay. So I since I'm not from Chicago, I basically call everything up there Chicago, which I
Yeah,
know
no, I
people
am
hate.
60 miles due
But
west of Chicago.
gotcha.
I
Gotcha.
grew up in Downers, moved to Naperville, kept moving west. My next move will be south, but um,
Yeah. What are you
that's
doing
what
up
there is.
there? You
Huh?
seem like you don't fit in up there. What are you doing up there?
No, it's better up here than, I'm west of 47, so it's
Mhm.
better up here where I'm at, but we have the Karens and everybody else moving in around us, so it is
That's
what
what
it
I
is.
meant. Yeah, the suburbs and all that stuff,
If
right?
everybody runs away, pretty soon there won't be, you'll be on an island, and when they get to that point, there's nothing left fighting for.
Yeah,
So I prefer to stick it out and fight to the best of my ability.
yeah.
Um, and that's it.
Well, hey, I would love to talk to you again. I feel like we
Sure.
have lot more to talk about. And of course, depending on how the developing future looks, we'll definitely have stuff to talk about. You'd laid out a timeline for like April and everything and how this may go. So maybe I'll touch base with you in the future. But for folks that have been listening and really liked what we were talking about, um, your YouTube channel is, what is it again?
Freedom's Steel.
Freedom's Steel.
It is Freedom's Steel.
Awesome.
See if I can
And
get
we'll
over
have
here.
that link in the podcast description, folks. If you want to check it out, definitely subscribe to the channel. The way I found you, so there's a subreddit called Illinois Guns, and it's an okay subreddit. The reason I say okay is just because I get that everybody's panicked, but there are just so many people asking questions that it's just a little redundant at times.
Yeah,
But a
that's
lot
what
of people
my
post your videos, man. A lot of people post your videos.
yeah, that's this is what the channel page looks like.
Nice.
So you see the bulldozer up there. That's the thing about it, because as an operating engineer, my gun club bought me some equipment so I can go build ranges. I'm in the middle of building 20 new ranges at the Aurora Sportsman's Club. So that's kind of, we're using that steel and iron to build more places for us to exercise our freedoms. That's kind of how the name came about and everything. So yeah, Freedom Steel. It's my YouTube page. I also understand there's a sub thing over on Reddit where I'm called the Gun Santa.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, I got a thing about that the other day. Guys have been telling me about that. So my videos get posted over there because I don't have a Reddit account. I I was doing good to do Facebook,
Uh-huh.
and Twitter is still, I still don't get it, but I don't understand all the little. I want to read a thread and I can't read a thread. It drives me
Sure.
nuts.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I get you, dude.
and so I've gotten into the YouTube thing because I was doing stuff about the gun club. You can go
Hmm.
find some of my videos of us moving dirt and building ranges, and then guys were like, "Why don't you do some two-way stuff?" And so I've been involved in that. So
Sweet. Well, again, I'd love to chat with you. Maybe next time we can make it happen in person and maybe we can even go shooting afterwards.
sure,
So,
not a problem.
cool. Cool. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed my time with Todd. Looking forward to the next one, man. All right.
All right,
See you,
guys,
folks.
frag out.